Research has shown that by setting goals, you are more likely to 10x your income. But if you are going to be spending any time setting your goals, then make sure you are setting them the right way. And today I'm going to be talking about the 5 ways that you can do that. So grab your cup of tea and let's dive into it. If you are the kind of person who writes down your goals, then the great news is that you are already winning. You are in the top 3% of adults who actually do this. And it might surprise you if this is something that comes naturally to you to know that you are actually in that minority and it's not something that the majority of adults actually do. In the book Goals by Brian Tracy, which is the best-selling book on goals ever, he talks about a study that was conducted in Harvard University. It was conducted in Harvard Business School, and it asked participants if they had clear goals and had made plans to achieve those goals. Only 3% of the people in that study indicated that they had those goals, they had written those goals down. Another 13% said that they had thought about them, they just had not written them down. And 84% said that they didn't have goals and they didn't write them down, they didn't have plans in that area yet. They were more focused on graduating, for example. 10 years later, it was found that the 13% of people who had goals but had not written them down had doubled on average the income of the 84% of the participants who didn't have goals written down, didn't think about these, and didn't have plans in this space. And the people who had written goals and who had thought about the plans in that space as well, the 3%, they on average had 10x their income compared to the combined 97% of the other participants in that study, just by having clarity around their goals. So let's talk about some of the ways that you can improve the way that you write your goals for clarity and to set yourself up for success. My tip number 1 is to set your goals in positive terms. Neurolinguistics programming, or NLP, has this really well thought through process for setting goals. And a lot of that process will go beyond the scope of this episode, but I want to highlight some of the key elements of that so that you have a simple strategy to be able to set your goals up for success. And one of those is to set your goals in positive terms. That means avoiding negative language in your goals. So things like no, not, won't, if you see those appearing in your goals, try and find how you can reframe that goal to be in the positive context instead. And also avoid words that have, for example, ER on the end of them. So greater, larger, that sort of terminology as well. Try to reframe that into positive terms instead. My tip number 2 is to set your goals in the present tense. This is another tip from NLP, from Neurolinguistics programming. So this means instead of saying that I will be a millionaire, you say, for example, I am a millionaire. You act as if you already have it. You put yourself into that position. Now, I will just note that you don't want to stop there because there's more that you need to do to articulate a goal like that, and hopefully that will be clearer as we get through this episode as well. But for now, just remember to change that into the present tense. Being able to describe your goal in a present sense really requires you to have an increased level of clarity around what that goal is. But also don't let this be confused with being happy in your present tense, for example. It doesn't mean that your goals need to be very short term. This is still about looking into the future. And in fact, that is actually a really important element of your goal setting. There was also another study that was conducted at Harvard University, and it was conducted over 50 years. And the researcher in that study found that the single most important determinant for financial and personal success was a future orientation. It was the ability to be able to look several years into the future and to plan your life accordingly around those things. And the significance of this cannot be overstated. And Brian Tracy himself in Goals says, This is one of the most important discoveries ever made. Just think, the further you think into the future, the better decisions you will make in the present to assure that that future becomes a reality. Tip number 3 for writing down your goals is to specify a well-formed outcome. One of the best things about the NLP goal setting process is that it requires you to have a full understanding of what that goal will look like. And you have to think about this in almost a sensory way. By understanding fully what that goal will actually look like when you actually achieve it, it allows you to set your goal with more clarity. This is where there is elements of the traditional SMART formula that can be useful. The SMART formula traditionally is that you have goals that are specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, and time bound. But if you have tuned into my previous episode on the 10x rule, you will know how I feel about some of those elements relating to things being achievable and realistic, and some of the potential pitfalls that come with setting safe goals like that. However, some people in the SMART formula actually use, instead of realistic, they use relevant, which I actually think has a lot of value, because the idea of relevant is that you really sense check your goals as being relevant to that future orientation. Where do you actually see yourself? Do those goals that you have set for yourself actually align with your values? Does it actually have value in your life as well? So I do like that one. But in terms of thinking of this well-formed outcome, think about particularly the elements of things being specific, measurable, and time-bound. And the reason that these are important is that it allows you to be able to identify when you have achieved those things. And I'm going to talk more on that next as well. But for now, just know that when you set specific goals, it allows you to have that really sensory full experience of what that goal is, so that you can actually chart the path to that thing more clearly. There is a really famous story relating to Jim Carrey, which you may have heard of in this space, which is a really good example of setting very specific goals. He is said to have, in 1985, written himself a check for 10 years into the future for $10 million. And on it, it said that it was for acting services rendered. And he carried this around with him. Then in November of 1995, so 10 years later, that is when he received the role for his place in Dumb and Dumber. And that was for the amount of $10 million. So make sure that you are fully contextualizing your goal. Consider the who, the what, the when, the where that this will actually happen. For example, instead of saying I will be a millionaire, you might say, for example, in your goals, when you write them down, it is 2030 and I am a millionaire with $1 million of my money in my bank account. See how when you write it in that way, for example, you are being almost as specific as you can be. For example, even just by saying my money in my bank account means that this isn't, a bank loan that you have got and it is a debt that you have that is sitting in your bank account. You want it to be really clear as to how you actually see that goal actually looking, and fully all the details of what it actually means. My tip number 4 for writing down your goals is to specify the evidence. For example, if you go back to the example that I just gave about it being 2030 and you have $1 million in your savings bank account, for example, you could go even further and articulate what that bank is, the actual bank account that you currently use or you will be using, and articulate that amount of money, because what this does is that it helps you to have the evidence then of when you have actually achieved that thing. You will know what it looks like, what it sounds like, what it feels like when you actually see that goal achieved. It might be the way that it looks on your phone when you see it, for example. So it really allows you to get that clear picture in your head. That is why, if you go back to my previous episode where I talked about vision boarding, I described that one of the things that I do is to actually take screenshots of my actual bank transactions and some of the money that has come in into that space of my actual bank, not just other banks and generic images in that space too, because I'm really specifying what that experience will look like for me. And this leads nicely into tip number 5, which is to ensure that you are setting self-initiated goals. This means that your personal goal setting process should actually be personal. For example, I can't set goals that are going to be related to my husband's happiness. But what I can do is set goals in my own personal space that I know will contribute to our happiness together, or things that I know bring him happiness, for example. Say you are also maybe a parent and you want to set goals for your child. You also have to keep in mind that you aren't able to actually live your child's life. So as much as you wish those things for them, and we wish those things for our loved ones, in our goal setting process, we need to make sure that we are highlighting what is actually within our control and what we can do to contribute to our happiness and the happiness of others. And that doesn't mean that your goal setting process is selfish. It means that it is just self-initiated, because really the NLP goal setting process, for example, actually asks you to really check in with how your goals are going to benefit particular people around you. So when you think about a particular goal that you are trying to achieve, also as a part of that process, you should be asking yourself who you want to achieve this for. For example, if you want financial success or professional success in a particular area, or you want to be physically healthy in a particular area in a different way, then this is still a way that it is self-initiated, and it allows you to be able to focus on the things that you can control, also knowing that it is going to benefit the people around you. If you were to achieve financial success, for example, that is something that you and your partner, or you and your family, or your friends can actually enjoy with you. So ask yourself who it is that you want to achieve those goals with. That's not to say that you are doing it with them, but it's to say that they will benefit from that as well. And what I really love about this sort of mindset when it comes to your goal setting is that it really requires you to take control over that goal setting process. Ask yourself what you can do now to put those goals into an action plan. And one of my favorite ways to do this, as I've talked about a lot on this channel, is to do that through the 12-week year format, which I've talked about in a previous episode in detail. That allows you to create a system, and a system of measurement as well, throughout your year, that will allow you to actually then take those goals and put that into a plan, a measurable plan. Make sure you check out my previous episode on that. Thanks so much, and I'll see you in the next episode.